Hey, this is Will. So this episode is going to be the ultimate guide to Medellin, Colombia for digital nomads or expats, or in general, if you want to come to this place for a bit longer time. I'm going to cover every single aspect out there, from accommodation, food, community, transportation, gyms, going out, everything basically that you need to know. This is going to be the one episode that you watch and then you are ready to go to Medellin. By the way, I have some very useful freebies if you are into this digital nomad lifestyle, online business, all that kind of stuff. So check out the links in the description. I will also leave whatever is useful that I mention and all of the updated information, everything, all that kind of stuff. Check out my website. There is also a group for other digital nomads where you can connect with other digital nomads, and also make sure to check out my social media, my Instagram, my Twitter, all that kind of stuff. Now let's jump into it. Okay, so the first thing when it comes to Medellin, Colombia is community. I think this is one of the most important factors when it comes to a digital nomad place. And I have to give a lot of props to Medellin, Colombia. I think it's honestly one of the best places for digital nomads around the world. And why I'm saying that is because there are a lot of digital nomads that you're going to find in Medellin, Colombia. I do have to say, depending on whether you have a preference, if this makes any sense, but there's going to be quite a lot of Americans because Medellin, Colombia in general, is pretty close to US. I mean, you literally can get a flight within 3 hours. You can be in Miami, in Florida. So definitely when it comes to percentage of who you're going to meet, it's going to be a bit higher percentage of Americans compared to some maybe other spots around the world. But in general, you do have people from everywhere and anywhere, and they do have quite a few co-working spaces, and it's easier to meet local people as well. So this is one of those things that also I have to give a lot of props, and it depends what you compare Medellin, Colombia to. But for example, if I compare this place to, let's say, Southeast Asia, it's honestly, for me, it's been always very difficult to make actual local friends. Yes, there is language barrier, but in general, I don't know whether it's the cultural thing or what. Only in Bali, really, I managed to make some good local friends, but in general, it's been a little bit difficult. However, when it comes to Medellin, I would say that is complete opposite. It's actually very, very simple, even though I do have to say there is quite a bit of a language barrier. A lot of people, they don't speak English, but if you can speak a little bit of broken Spanish, then you can still try and communicate, and people are pretty open, honestly, even if you don't quite speak the language. And if you go out to do some salsa lessons, if you're a foreigner, especially if you look like a foreigner, a lot of people are going to approach you and try to teach you how to dance. And in general, I would say people are very friendly and really willing to invest some time into creating those relationships. So I would say that's a big plus, that you're not only limited to basically other expats, other digital nomads, but you can actually interact with some local people as well. Next point is accommodation. And honestly, when it comes to accommodation, if I'm being completely honest, Medellin isn't necessarily my favorite place. And don't get me wrong, it really depends what you compare this to again, because if I just think in terms of all of the different destinations that I've been to, accommodation is definitely, I would say, on a higher price range. And what I mean by this is it's not about the price itself, but the price and quality ratio. So you can definitely find some very cheap apartments. You can find an apartment maybe for $300-400, which is super cheap, but it's not going to be that nice. In general, I think there's something about the style where you you have very sort of simplistic style and a little bit sort of old school. So honestly, it really depends where exactly you're going to rent. As I said, basically in general, you have two areas where you might want to live as a foreigner. So that is Poblado, which is, I would say, sort of the most foreign neighborhood where you have the most expats, the most digital nomads, and there's the most bars and restaurants and all that kind of stuff. And then you have Laureles, which is a little bit more local but also has a lot of foreigners. And these are sort of the two neighborhoods that usually you want to live in, and these are the ones that I would personally recommend, because aside from that, it might be not as safe. So those two neighborhoods, they are much safer, and also in general you have more things to do within these neighborhoods. You can also maybe live, I know some people live in Envigado, but in general I would say those are the two neighborhoods. So if you want to live in Poblado, then that is going to be a little bit more expensive. So I would say maybe, let's say if you're looking at super cheap apartment in Laureles, you might find something for maybe around, let's say, $400, $500. In Poblado, maybe it's going to be another maybe $100 extra on top of that. So that's maybe what, around 20% extra. If you want to have a little bit more, I would say, nicer apartment, then that's going to be somewhere around, I would say, from $700 to $800 in Laureles, and in Poblado, I would say from $8, $9, $1,000, maybe somewhere around that price tag. And if you go honestly above $1,000, you can actually find some really nice apartments. One of the things that I love about the city is that you have really nice views. So you're basically sort of in a valley and you're surrounded by the mountains, so you can get one of these penthouses on the top of the building, and then you have just incredible views. One of the places where I stayed had just these amazing views from the balcony, and I literally had parrots, all of these amazing parrots just come in the middle of the city and the mountains and all of that. So you can definitely find very nice accommodation, but at the same time I will say that you're going to definitely pay more compared to what you could get in other digital nomad places around the world. And well, depends where you go, but in terms of, let's say, if you compare that to Southeast Asia, or you compare that to, let's say, Georgia, all the Balkan countries, definitely, and even in Europe, rent is more expensive maybe, but I would say if you're going for that really nice apartment, I would say it's not that huge of a difference. Okay, maybe you'll get nicer in Colombia, but honestly, if you want that premium, it's going to also cost a little bit more. Next, we got food, and when it comes to food, obviously this is a very personal thing, but if I'm completely honest and don't tell any of my Colombian friends, I'm honestly not huge on Colombian food. So before I came to Colombia, I honestly kind of just knew mostly of Mexican food. I kind of just expected, I know Mexico is not in South America, but I kind of expected the same thing in South America, and I was like, oh, this is going to be amazing and all of that. And honestly, I don't find the food that exciting, and I don't really find that many options as well. So you do have sort of like the standard meal, which is menu del dia, which is the menu of the day, basically what they call it. And that is sort of just some plantain, some sausage, and kind of just, I don't know, sort of like a basic dish that you can get this for actually a very cheap price. So that's going to cost you maybe, I would say, around $3. So that's very affordable. But aside from that, I would say you don't really have that many options per se. So a lot of times, at least for me, I would go for Western food, and Western food is a little bit more expensive. So let's say a typical lunch might be somewhere, I would say maybe $7 to $10, somewhere in that price range, depending again what kind of restaurant you go, which area, and so on. It can really differ so much. If you're going for dinner and you want to go to a nice restaurant, honestly, it's going to be maybe between $10 to $15, and that is going to be very nice, great quality food. So I would say it's definitely much cheaper than, let's say, if you're going out and eating out in Europe or United States. But if I compare this to, let's say, Southeast Asia, or again, Georgia, Turkey, these kind of places, then it's definitely more expensive. So I would say it's somewhere there in the middle. If we're talking groceries, on the other hand, groceries are actually, I would say, very cheap. They don't really, I don't even know what you compare it to, but in general, I would say that they're definitely not more expensive than any other country that I really encountered. And they do have different supermarkets. They have the really value ones, they have a little bit more expensive ones. In general, the labor is very cheap in Colombia. So all of the produce, the farms and all of that, they are, I would say, very cheap because of that as well. I don't know honestly if it's just that, but in general, food, I would say, if you're doing your own groceries, it's definitely not going to be expensive. Next, we got co-working spaces. So there are some co-working spaces in the city. I mean, it's a fairly big city, depending again what you compare it to, but you do have some co-working spaces in Poblado and in Laureles as well. In Poblado, if you go to Selena, this is basically like a chain of all of these co-working spaces and hostels around South America, and actually in, I think, more countries now. So that co-working space is super nice, and it's insanely cheap in comparison. I mean, what you get for the money, I believe the price is around $100, and honestly, it's a very nice place. So you definitely get good value for co-working. Next, we got transportation, and transportation is very cheap. In general, at least from my personal experience, it really depends what's your budget and all that kind of stuff. I never really took much of the public transportation. Yes, you can take buses. Yes, they have the subway, the train, and all of that, and it's going to cost you less than $1. It's very cheap, very affordable. You can take it. I did take it sometimes if I go to specific places, but most of the time, as I said, there are sort of these two neighborhoods where you are going to hang out most of the time, honestly, and usually if you're within those neighborhoods, you can actually walk quite a bit within those neighborhoods. I don't even know if you need necessarily transportation, maybe sometimes. But if you want to go, for example, between the two neighborhoods, the taxis are very cheap as well. It's only going to cost you maybe $3 to $4 to take a taxi between the two neighborhoods. So really, a lot of times you might end up taking a taxi because it is very cheap. Next is going out. So going out in Colombia or in Medellin is honestly a lot of fun. I think it's one of, it depends honestly what kind of going out you like, I guess, but for me I would say it's definitely one of the most fun places. Obviously, you have a lot of bars, a lot of restaurants, a lot of clubs, all of these kind of things. One thing that Medellin, Colombia in general is known for is salsa. So you definitely have a lot of places where people dance salsa and all of that. So if that's something you're into, or if you're not into, I would say definitely try it out. Once you're there, you definitely have to try it out. And a lot of people are going to help you out and all of that. So I would say it's definitely a lot of fun. There are even these party buses that you can take. I remember taking a bus that basically you can just jump on this bus and they just go from one place to other place, and they just have, it's not even like an event that you buy a ticket for. These buses, they're always just going around, and you can basically just pay the fee, you jump into the bus, everyone's drinking, everyone's partying, and they go from one place to the other. It's very interesting experience. In general though, I would say, again, it depends what kind of place you go to and so on and so forth, but I would say that going out, again, if I compare it in general terms of all of the different digital nomad destinations, I would say Medellin, Colombia is somewhere in the middle again. So it's definitely cheaper than United States, than Europe. It's a lot cheaper than those places. But if I compare it to something, let's say like Southeast Asia or the Balkans, Turkey, Georgia, whatever, it's more expensive than those places. So it really depends what you compare it to. In general, it's not too bad, but yeah, expect somewhere in the middle. When it comes to general goods, I would say that in Colombia, you might struggle to find certain things. So they do have its Medellin is a big city. Again, you do have the big shopping malls and all of that kind of stuff. However, at the same time, I do have to say that some of the things are a little bit more expensive. When it comes to usually electronics, they are a little bit more expensive, especially if you need, let's say, cameras, computers, all of that kind of stuff. But other than that, if you're just buying basics, if you're buying clothes and all of that kind of stuff, I would say that for me, I wouldn't say there's a huge sort of whether it's a lot more expensive or it's a lot cheaper. I would say the prices are kind of just average, basically what you would see anywhere else. Next is climate, and climate is one of the main reasons why people love Medellin, Colombia. It's really, for a lot of people, it's probably the perfect climate. They call it eternal spring because the weather is pretty much exactly the same throughout the whole year. So throughout the day, it's around 27 degrees Celsius, which I think is around 80 Fahrenheit. And during the night, it does drop off a little bit. Well, not a little bit, but it drops off to maybe around 17, 20 degrees Celsius. So I believe that's around maybe 62, 65 Fahrenheit. So during the day, it's really, as he said, pretty much perfect. It doesn't really rain a lot. It's pretty much sunny almost always. So really during the day, you pretty much just can walk around with a t-shirt, but it isn't that weather when you just go out and you start sweating like in certain countries. Once it's above that 30 Celsius, above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, then it gets very hot. I would say this is sort of perfect, just a little bit below that. And the humidity or all of that, the dryness really, I would say, is pretty good as well. So in terms of climate, I think it's very, very nice. In the evening, you might need a little sort of jacket, just a thin jacket, and that is it. But it really doesn't get very cold. Next thing is internet. So I never really had any issues when it comes to internet in Medellin, Colombia. Usually, I would say you can find internet, or most of the places, apartments you're gonna rent, or they're going to have around 50 megabytes, and some places you can go as much as 100 megabytes. In general, I would say the connection is pretty stable and it's pretty fast as well. If you need mobile internet, again, sort of around the same as well, very stable and pretty good speeds. And it's not going to cost much. It's going to cost you for 10-15 gigabytes. It's around $15-20, depending again what provider you use, what plan it is, so on and so forth. Next is safety, and this is a big topic when it comes to Medellin and when it comes to Colombia. I still remember first time I told my mother that I'm going to Medellin. She almost killed me herself because there is this image of Medellin, Colombia just being absolutely hectic. If you've ever watched Narcos on Netflix, which you definitely should if you haven't, that's what Colombia used to be like. It used to be insanely hectic because of all of the drugs. However, it has changed drastically over the past few years, or actually even a couple decades. So I'm not going to lie out here and say that yes, Colombia is the safest place in the world and all of that, because I do feel like I meet a lot of people that push that sort of perspective of Colombia a lot, that it's insanely safe. And I would say still, if you compare it to the rest of the world, it isn't the safest place. And I do understand that in a lot of cities in US, in a lot of cities in Europe, they're super unsafe, honestly. Actually, a lot of countries, I would say in Southeast Asia, they are much safer than the Western world. But Colombia, I would say, is still more dangerous, I would say, than probably most of the places in US. Obviously, there's some really dodgy places in US, and I would say most of the places in Europe. So in general, if honestly you are smart about the things that you do, you don't go to super hectic neighborhoods, you stay in your lane, you don't basically get drunk and go to random bars, random clubs with some random girls. Usually that's what guys do at the early hours of the morning. Usually you should be okay. I do have to say though, a lot of people I encountered, they did have some kind of experience. So I did have a couple of friends, but they spent a lot of time in Medellin, by the way. It wasn't that they spent a month and that's it. They spent a couple of years in Medellin, and they did have some incidents where maybe something was stolen from them. I remember some friends had like a phone stolen, another friend had a laptop stolen. So it does happen, but again, this usually always happened to them when they were out drinking, something like that. But it can really happen at any time, actually. I did have one Colombian friend that was telling me that he actually got robbed in just in the middle of the day on like a busy street, which sounds crazy, but that stuff can happen. And I did have another friend that actually there is amazing, by the way, Vice documentary. Just Google some Vice Medellin Colombia, or just Colombia, the most notorious drug or something like that, where basically they do have this drug where it sort of you say yes to everything and it completely erases your memory and all of that kind of stuff. So that did happen to a friend of mine, but then again, he was in a club that he knew he wasn't supposed to go to in early hours of the morning, just following some girls, that kind of stuff, and that's what happened to him. But in general, I spent a few months, and nothing bad happened to me, but I would say it's definitely, you don't want to, late at night, you don't want to walk by yourself. You do want to take cabs when you go from one place to other. And in general, you do need to think about safety. If you're walking around, let's say with a big camera, stuff like that, you do need to sort of think about what you are doing and, be basically aware of your surroundings, which is one big minus, I would say, that is very annoying thing, because there are some countries where honestly I never really need to think about it, so that kind of sucks. But again, it isn't maybe as bad as you might think because of knowing the whole history. Next, we got costs. So when it comes to Medellin, as I sort of already somewhat explained, it really depends quite a bit on your accommodation, and also would say quite a bit on going out, because they do have some very nice places that do get quite a bit expensive. In general, I do know people like to do this thing, whether they can be at a place, live in a place for a month for $1,000. And I would say when it comes to Medellin, Colombia, honestly, technically you could do it. As I mentioned, you could find an apartment for $400-$500 and then, spend the rest of it on your living expenses. Technically, you can do that, but I would say that wouldn't really be comfortable. I would recommend at least $1,200 if you want to be sort of have comfortable life, and if you really want to have more sort of fun and flexibility and all of that, I would recommend at least maybe $1,500. And obviously, if you want really nice life that can add up quite a bit, as I said, accommodation. If you want really nice accommodation, that's going to be, let's say, $1,000 a month but that's going to be a super nice apartment with super nice view, all that kind of stuff. If you want to always eat out, as I said, a dinner might be $10-$15 in a really nice place. Uber, or not Uber, but taxis are super cheap, so honestly that's not going to cost much, but still might add up if you're always taking a cab. But yeah, in general, it really depends. I kind of try to mention all of the different things costs, so it depends on your lifestyle. But as I said, in general terms, it's more expensive again than I would say if you compare it to Southeast Asia or you compare it to the Balkans, Georgia, Turkey. I would say it's definitely more expensive place, but it's definitely much cheaper than United States or Europe. Next, we have visas. So when it comes to Colombia, you need to check, every country is different. Usually you can get 90-day visa within 180 days. So that's kind of the thing, that a lot of people can't do visa runs like in certain countries. You can't just hop the border, come back, get a new visa, because there's a certain limit of the days within a 180-day period. So that's I think for most of the nationalities, but you might want to check yourself depending on your nationality. And another alternative, if you want to stay longer, I do know that you can get a visa that perhaps, let's say you're learning the language, you're learning Spanish, you can enroll in a school and you can get a visa in that kind of way. So if that's something you're interested in, staying longer, then you can look into it. Next is English. And honestly, when it comes to Medellin, Colombia, at least from my experience, it seemed like not that many people honestly speak English. So if you only speak English, you might have a little bit of a difficulty. Again, there's a lot of expats as well, as he said, and a lot of expats, they actually speak Spanish. So a lot of friends that you will make, they can help you out. And as I said, you can make local friends that are Colombians as well. So in a lot of cases, you might have someone actually that speaks Spanish and they can help you out. But at the same time, if you're just by yourself, honestly, I wouldn't expect many people to speak English. And I would suggest to learn a little bit of Spanish. Honestly, Spanish is probably one of the easiest languages out there, at least for the basic, and especially if you speak English, a lot of words, they are kind of related. Check out, I have a video, or I'm going to create a video by the time I post this, that teaches you how to learn different languages. But if you do speak a bit of Spanish, I think that's going to take you quite a bit. So now, overall vibe of Medellin, Colombia. So Medellin, Colombia is, as I mentioned, one of the hot spots for digital nomads, and I think that is for a reason. It's not an accident. As I mentioned, it is really amazing weather. You do have a lot of people, you do have some really cool co-working spaces, you do have super fun social life. So there's a lot of good things happening. And aside from just being in Medellin, if you do want to explore a little bit more, you can easily take some trips to go to all of the different small towns, which is something that I definitely recommend as well. There are some absolutely amazing, beautiful little towns out there that is very cheap and affordable, by the way, as well. And in general, I would say Medellin is, again, it's a fairly big city. It doesn't feel, though, I would say, too crowded like certain places definitely do. If you go to Bangkok or you go to Istanbul, Turkey, it's just insanely crowded. Medellin definitely doesn't feel like that, but it still has all of the different things that a big city can provide you. And in general, I would say it's a good place if you want to have a lot of fun. But honestly, if you just want to go on hikes, have some friends, just go to nice restaurants and, you know, do a lot of work, you can definitely do that in Medellin, Colombia as well. So it's sort of, I would say, it's a very good balance of all of the different things you can do. The only downside for me probably is that there's no water, so you don't have any beach. Okay, a couple extras that you might want to consider. So first of all, when it comes to medical stuff is actually, I would say, it's very good in Colombia. I know a lot of people from US, they come to Colombia for medical tourism, and I did get some dental stuff done. So I got a wisdom tooth taken out. I don't remember how much I paid, but I believe it was maybe around $70 or something like that, which really wasn't bad. It was a really nice dental clinic as well. Oh, and I also had some other stuff done as well in some hospital, and that was also very, very affordable. It's honestly very affordable, and I would say it's very good quality as well. Aside from that, when it comes to gyms, you'll find a ton of gyms. It's going to be maybe around $20-30 for a membership. Another thing that's pretty popular, as I mentioned, labor is fairly cheap in Colombia. So if you want to get a cleaning lady that comes, cleans your apartment, maybe even cooks for you, you can get that for around maybe $10 to $15, and that's basically her coming in and cleaning maybe for 3 to 4 hours. Aside from all that, as I said, I would definitely suggest to learn a bit of Spanish before you go to Medellin, Colombia. I do think that's going to help you out quite a bit. And do look up, there's a lot of different events of language exchange. You have some digital nomad events and stuff like that. So it is a very easy place to meet people if you are willing to take those little steps. So I hope you found this useful. If you do have any questions, if you're listening to this as a podcast, then take the title, put it on YouTube, find the video, and leave your questions in the comments. Again, I will leave all of the different useful things, everything I mentioned, in the description, so check out all of the links. Make sure to check out some of my freebies as well if you're interested in digital nomad stuff, online business, all that kind of all those kind of things. Make sure to also follow me on my social media. Check out my Instagram, my Twitter, check out some of my other videos. If you found this useful, make sure to smash the thumbs up button, subscribe, put on those notifications. Stay awesome, and I'll see you soon.